In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists a universal truth that every species learns too late: never underestimate a human who chooses to remain silent. The Galactic Council had catalogued over 10,000 sentient species across 47 galaxies. They had witnessed the birth of empires that spanned star systems, watched as ancient races transcended physical existence, and documented the fall of civilizations that once seemed eternal. Yet in all their eons of observation, they had never encountered anything quite like humanity. Most species, when first introduced to the galactic community, either cowered in fear or strutted with false bravado. The humans did something far more unsettling. They observed. They sat quietly in the back of assembly halls, took meticulous notes, asked simple questions that somehow revealed complex truths, and smiled politely while absorbing every detail of alien technology, culture, and weakness. The Council initially dismissed them as a primitive, harmless species from a backwater planet called Earth. They were wrong. Catastrophically wrong. This is the story of Sarah Chen, a soft-spoken xenobiologist who preferred library corners to conference podiums, who stammered when asked direct questions, and who single-handedly became the most feared individual in known space. Not through violence or conquest, but through something far more terrifying to the galactic powers: understanding. Some called her the Silent Storm. Others whispered of the human huntress who never missed her mark. But, to those who truly knew what she was capable of, she was simply known as the Pursuer, the one human who, once she set her sights on you, would follow you to the very edge of existence itself. The galaxy thought it knew humanity. The galaxy was wrong. The Meridian Station hummed with the controlled chaos of interspecies diplomacy, its vast corridors echoing with the chittering, roaring, and harmonic communications of beings from across the known galaxy. Ambassador Kethvar of the hegemony adjusted his ceremonial scales, each one polished to reflect his species' dominance over 43 star systems. Today marked humanity's first official integration ceremony into the Galactic Council, and he intended to make their inferiority abundantly clear. Sarah Chen sat in the designated human section, row 47, C12, exactly where she had positioned herself for every session over the past 6 months. Her worn leather notebook balanced on her knees, filled with observations written in Earth's archaic script that most species dismissed as primitive scratches. She wore the same faded brown cardigan she had brought from Earth, comfortable shoes that made no sound on the station's metallic floors, and wire-rimmed glasses that constantly slipped down her nose. The other human delegates sat in the front rows, their crisp uniforms and confident postures designed to project strength. They spoke in measured tones during breaks, shook hands with alien dignitaries, and followed protocols with military precision. Sarah preferred the back, where she could watch everything without being watched in return. The human delegation will now present their species credentials for council membership, announced the session moderator, a crystalline being whose voice resonated through harmonic frequencies that made Sarah's teeth ache. Ambassador Victoria Sterling rose from the front row, her silver hair perfectly styled, her posture radiating decades of diplomatic experience. She approached the central platform where a holographic display would broadcast her words to thousands of worlds simultaneously. Sarah noticed how the other delegates watched Sterling with polite attention, their body language suggesting they had already decided humanity's fate. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Sterling began, humanity comes before you today with humility and hope. Our species has much to learn from your ancient civilizations, and we offer our unique perspectives in return. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in. What Sarah had learned was equivalent to a dismissive laugh. She wrote this observation in her notebook, along with the micro-expressions of the 34 other species representatives she could see from her position. The Zalfirian delegate's tentacles had shifted to a darker shade of purple, indicating skepticism. The hivemind representative of the collective had fallen silent, their usual telepathic chatter reduced to white noise, suggesting disinterest. Sterling continued her presentation, highlighting humanity's achievements in art, science, and exploration. She spoke of their rapid technological advancement, their adaptability, their strong social structures. The alien delegates listened with the patience of beings who had heard similar speeches from hundreds of species, most of whom were now either extinct, enslaved, or relegated to backwater planets. Sarah's pencil moved steadily across her notebook pages, recording not just what was said, but what remained unspoken. She had spent 6 months learning the subtle languages of posture, scent, electromagnetic fluctuations, and bioluminescent patterns that reveal true intentions beneath diplomatic words. The knowledge accumulated like sediment, layer upon layer of understanding that painted a picture the other humans couldn't see. The presentation ended to polite applause that echoed strangely in the vast chamber. Sterling returned to her seat, satisfaction evident in her bearing. The human delegation exchanged confident glances, believing their case had been well made. High Arbiter Zexthal rose from the elevated platform that dominated the chamber's center. Their species, the Dominion, had founded the Galactic Council 12,000 years ago and remained its ultimate authority. Standing 4 meters tall with skin that shifted between metallic hues, they commanded respect through presence alone. The Council acknowledges humanity's petition, Zexthal intoned, their voice carrying undertones that Sarah's enhanced hearing implants could barely detect. However, full membership requires demonstration of capability beyond mere words. Humanity will be granted provisional status, with territories restricted to your home system and the 3 nearest unoccupied worlds. You will have 1 standard galactic year to prove your worthiness for full admission. Sarah's pencil stopped moving. She looked up from her notebook for the first time during the session, her brown eyes scanning the faces around the chamber. She saw satisfaction in some expressions, amusement in others, and something that made her stomach tighten, anticipation. Ambassador Sterling stood again, her diplomatic training keeping her voice level despite the obvious disappointment. We thank the Council for this opportunity. Might I ask what criteria will be used to evaluate our worthiness? Kethvar leaned forward, his scales catching the chamber's artificial light. The galaxy is vast and dangerous, human. Your species will face challenges that test not just your strength, but your wisdom, adaptability, and resolve. Some will come from environmental hazards, others from hostile species who see weakness in your youth. Many civilizations have failed these tests. We hope humanity will prove different. The way he said the last word sent chills through Sarah's enhanced nervous system. She began writing again, faster now, capturing every nuance of the exchange. Her training as a xenobiologist had taught her to recognize patterns, and the pattern emerging in this chamber was one she had seen before in nature: predator and prey. The session ended with formal ceremonies that felt hollow to Sarah's analytical mind. The human delegation received their provisional membership documents, territorial assignments, and communication protocols. They shook hands with alien representatives who offered congratulations that didn't reach their eyes. Through it all, Sarah remained in her seat, writing, watching, learning. As the chamber began to empty, she finally stood to leave. Her movement was quiet, unobtrusive, but it caught the attention of someone she hadn't expected. High Arbiter Zexthal's massive form approached her section, their metallic features studying her with an intensity that made her want to disappear into her cardigan. You are not like the others, Zexthal observed, their voice modulated to frequencies only Sarah could hear. You watch. You learn. You understand. Sarah clutched her notebook to her chest, her cheeks flushing red. I'm just a scientist, High Arbiter. I study behavior patterns in new environments. Indeed. Zexthal's skin shifted to a copper hue that Sarah's research had identified as indicating deep thought. Tell me, scientist, what patterns have you observed in this environment? The question hung in the air like a trap. Sarah could feel the weight of attention from delegates who lingered nearby, pretending to have conversations while clearly listening. Her enhanced hearing picked up the subtle sounds of recording devices activating. Whatever she said next would be analyzed by intelligence agencies across the galaxy. Predation cycles, she answered quietly, her voice barely audible. Resource competition. Territorial establishment. The usual behaviors when ecosystems include new species. Zexthal's skin rippled through several color changes so rapidly that Sarah couldn't interpret them all. When the High Arbiter spoke again, their voice carried a note she hadn't heard before: respect. Most species that join the council see only the ceremony, the honor, the opportunities. They miss the underlying structures that maintain order across such vast diversity. Your people may prove more interesting than anticipated. With that, the High Arbiter departed, leaving Sarah alone in the emptying chamber. She looked down at her notebook, at pages filled with observations that suddenly felt far more significant than academic exercises. The patterns she had identified were clear to her now, painted in alien body language and diplomatic subtext. Humanity had not been welcomed into the Galactic Council. They had been placed in a carefully constructed maze designed to test, challenge, and ultimately eliminate species deemed unworthy of true membership. The provisional status, the territorial restrictions, the vague criteria for advancement, all of it was part of a system that had operated for millennia, winnowing out civilizations before they could become threats to established power structures. But, as Sarah walked through Meridian Station's corridors toward the human quarters, her mind was already working on a different problem. The aliens had created their maze based on assumptions about human behavior drawn from countless species that had come before. They expected certain responses to certain stimuli, predictable patterns of adaptation or failure. What they didn't understand was that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history as persistence hunters. They could track prey across vast distances, not through speed or strength, but through relentless pursuit and analytical observation. They studied their targets, learned their habits, identified their weaknesses, and never stopped following until the hunt was complete. The Galactic Council had just made themselves Sarah Chen's prey. They simply didn't know it yet. Back in her modest quarters, Sarah spread her notebooks across a small desk and began transcribing her observations into digital format. Her enhanced memory implants allowed her to recall every detail with perfect clarity, but she preferred the physical act of writing for initial observations. There was something about the connection between hand and mind that digital interfaces couldn't replicate. As she worked, her door chimed softly. Dr. Marcus Webb entered without waiting for permission, his face flushed with excitement and alcohol from the celebration the human delegation was hosting. "Sarah! There you are. Sterling's been looking for you. The whole team wants to celebrate, we did it. We're in the council." Sarah looked up from her notebooks, noting the slight slur in Webb's words, the elevated color in his cheeks, the way his pupils had dilated. He was drunk on alcohol and success, unable to see the larger picture. It wasn't entirely his fault. The human delegation had been chosen for their diplomatic skills and public presence, not their ability to recognize sophisticated predatory strategies. "We're not in yet, Marcus," she said gently, turning back to her work. "We're on probation." Webb waved dismissively, knocking over a stylus holder in his enthusiasm. "Details. The important thing is we've made contact, established relationships, shown them what humanity can offer. Sterling says the territorial restrictions are just formalities, standard procedure for new species." Sarah nodded absently, making a note about human cognitive biases under stress. Hope could be as blinding as fear, and their delegation was suffering from a massive case of confirmation bias. They were interpreting everything through the lens of what they wanted to believe rather than what the evidence actually suggested. "Marcus, did you notice Kethvar's reaction when Zexthal mentioned hostile species testing us? The way his scales shifted color and his mandibles clicked?" Webb frowned, clearly struggling to recall details through his celebratory haze. "Not really." "Why?" He was excited. Anticipatory. Not concerned for our welfare, but eager to see what would happen when we face these challenges. Sarah pulled up a holographic display from her tablet, showing a complex diagram of alien physiological responses she had been mapping. "Look at these patterns. 37 different species, all showing similar micro-expressions during the discussion of our probationary period. They're not hoping we'll succeed, Marcus. They're betting on how we'll fail." Webb's excitement dimmed slightly as he leaned over her shoulder to study the display. Even through his alcoholic fog, he could see the patterns she had identified. The evidence was comprehensive, methodical, and utterly damning. "But surely some of them are genuine allies," he protested weakly. The Meridian delegation seemed friendly enough. And that crystalline species, the resonance, they were very welcoming during the reception. Sarah pulled up another display, this one showing communication patterns and alliance structures within the council. Red lines connected hostile relationships, blue indicated alliances, and yellow marked neutral or unknown connections. The resulting web looked like a spider's trap, with humanity sitting squarely in the center. The Meridian delegation is controlled by the hegemony through economic dependencies established over 3,000 years ago, she explained patiently. The resonants are a client species of the Dominion, with no autonomous political power. Even the species that seem independent are locked into power structures that prevent them from supporting potential competitors. Webb sank into a chair, the implications finally penetrating his celebration. So what are you saying? That the entire council is against us? That this is all some elaborate trap? Sarah removed her glasses and cleaned them carefully, a habit she had developed when dealing with complex problems. I'm saying that the Galactic Council is not what our delegation believes it to be. It's not a cooperative alliance of equal partners working toward mutual benefit. It's a carefully maintained hierarchy designed to preserve the dominance of founder species while extracting resources and labor from lesser civilizations. She gestured to her notebooks, hundreds of pages filled with observations, measurements, and analysis. Humanity has been classified as a potential threat due to our rapid technological advancement and expansion rate. The probationary period is designed to identify our strengths and weaknesses, then create challenges specifically calibrated to exploit our failure points. Webb stared at the evidence arrayed before him, his diplomatic training warring with the undeniable patterns Sarah had identified. Even if you're right, what can we do? We can't fight the entire galaxy. We can't even fight a single member species with any real power. Sarah replaced her glasses and smiled for the first time since arriving at Meridian Station. It was not a comforting expression. It was the smile of a predator that had identified its prey's behavioral patterns and found them wanting. We don't fight them, Marcus. We hunt them. 3 months after humanity's admission to Provisional Council membership, the first test arrived with devastating precision. The agricultural colony on New Eden, humanity's largest settlement outside the Sol system, reported massive crop failures. What had started as a routine growing season turned into a catastrophe that threatened to starve 40,000 colonists. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the colony's central laboratory, her equipment spread across 3 workstations like a surgeon's instruments. The other members of the emergency response team bustled around her, taking readings, collecting samples, and maintaining constant communication with Earth's agricultural experts. They worked with the desperate efficiency of people racing against time and famine. Sarah worked with the methodical patience of a hunter examining tracks. The pathogen is unlike anything in our databases, reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, New Eden's chief botanist. Her voice carried the strain of 72 hours without sleep and the weight of responsibility for thousands of lives. It targets the cellular structure of all our major food crops simultaneously, but leaves native vegetation completely untouched. Sarah nodded without looking up from her microscope. She had expected something like this. Her analysis of council behavioral patterns had predicted that their first test would target humanity's expansion capabilities, specifically their food production systems. Starvation was an ancient weapon, elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its effectiveness. Have you determined the infection vector? Asked Commander Patricia Hayes, the military attaché assigned to coordinate Earth's response. Her crisp uniform and stern bearing projected confidence, but Sarah noticed the slight tremor in her hands that indicated barely controlled anxiety. Dr. Vasquez pulled up a holographic display showing the progression of the pathogen across New Eden's agricultural zones. That's what makes this so unusual. The infection pattern doesn't follow standard biological distribution models. It appeared simultaneously across 17 different farming zones, despite strict quarantine protocols between sectors. Sarah finally looked up from her equipment, her expression thoughtful. Has anyone checked the atmospheric processors? The room fell silent. Atmospheric processors were the massive installations that maintained New Eden's breathable environment and weather patterns. They were so fundamental to the colony's existence that they had become invisible infrastructure, as unnoticed as gravity. Commander Hayes activated her communication implant. Hayes to atmospheric control. I need a complete diagnostic of all processors, immediately. Check for any anomalies in the past month. While they waited for the response, Sarah returned to her samples. Under magnification, the pathogen was beautiful in its complexity, clearly engineered rather than naturally evolved. The cellular structure showed sophisticated design principles that reminded her of something she had seen before, though she couldn't quite place the memory.
Commander Hayes, this is atmospheric control. We're showing unusual readings from processors 7, 12, and 23.
There was a scheduled maintenance visit 3 weeks ago by a Galactic Council technical team. They upgraded our air filtration systems with some kind of enhanced molecular screening technology.
Sarah's pencil stopped moving across her notebook.
She looked up slowly, her enhanced memory implants retrieving every detail of the council session where humanity's territorial assignments had been discussed. The resident delegation had specifically recommended New Eden for agricultural development, praising its atmospheric composition and soil chemistry. They had even offered technical assistance to optimize the colony's environmental systems.
Commander, I need you to order an immediate shutdown of those 3 processors, Sarah said quietly. And prepare a complete atmospheric purge of the affected agricultural zones. Hayes frowned.
Dr. Chen, those processors maintain life support for 6,000 colonists.
We can't just shut them down without understanding why.
Sarah turned her tablet toward the group, displaying a molecular analysis of the pathogen. Because this organism requires specific atmospheric conditions to survive. It needs trace amounts of xenon-137, a rare isotope that doesn't occur naturally in Earth-type atmospheres. But xenon-137 is commonly used in resonant technology as a catalyst for environmental systems.
The implications hit everyone simultaneously.
Dr. Vasquez grabbed the nearest communication console. Emergency shutdown protocol for atmospheric processors 7, 12, and 23. Initiate backup life support and prepare for atmospheric purge.
As alarms began sounding across the colony, Sarah continued her explanation with clinical detachment.
The pathogen was designed to activate when specific atmospheric conditions were met. The resonant upgrade to our processors was actually a delivery system. Once the pathogen was distributed through the air circulation system, it could infect crops across multiple sectors simultaneously. Commander Hayes was already coordinating with Earth Command, her voice clipped with military precision.
This is an act of biological warfare.
We need to inform the Council immediately, file formal complaints, demand investigation and compensation. Sarah closed her notebook and began packing her equipment with the same methodical care she brought to everything. That would be a mistake, Commander. Hayes turned from her communications, her face flushed with anger.
A mistake? Dr. Chen, they just tried to commit genocide against our colonists.
No, Sarah replied patiently. They tested our detection capabilities, response time, and problem-solving strategies.
This was never intended to actually starve the colony. Notice how the pathogen only affects crops that would take months to regrow? They want us weakened, not destroyed. A dead species provides no useful data. She gestured to the atmospheric processors visible through the laboratory's windows, massive structures that dominated the colony's skyline.
If you file complaints and demand investigations, you're telling them that we identified their test methodology.
That means the next test will be more sophisticated, harder to detect, more dangerous. Better to let them think we were lucky.
Dr. Vasquez looked between Sarah and Commander Hayes with growing confusion.
Are you suggesting we just accept this attack? Let them poison our colonies without consequences?
Sarah picked up her equipment case and walked toward the laboratory exit. I'm suggesting that the best hunters let their prey think they haven't been noticed. We learn their methods, identify their capabilities, and prepare for the real hunt. As she reached the door, Commander Hayes called after her.
Dr. Chen, what aren't you telling us? You seem to know more about this than someone who just arrived should. Sarah paused, considering how much to reveal.
The truth was that she had been preparing for this moment since leaving Meridian Station 3 months ago. Her notebooks contained not just observations from the council session, but detailed analyses of every member species' technology, biology, psychology, and historical behavior patterns. She had compiled profiles of their strengths and weaknesses, identified their power structures and dependencies, and mapped their relationships with mathematical precision. What she had discovered was that the Galactic Council was far more vulnerable than they believed. Their age and power had made them arrogant, predictable, trapped by their own success into patterns of behavior that could be exploited by someone patient enough to study them properly.
I'm a xenobiologist, Commander. It's my job to understand alien behavior patterns.
Sarah adjusted her glasses, a gesture that had become habitual when she was thinking several moves ahead.
And I've learned that humans have certain advantages that our alien friends don't fully appreciate.
Commander Hayes stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper.
What kind of advantages?
Sarah smiled that same unsettling smile she had shown Dr. Webb months earlier.
We're persistence hunters, Commander. We don't kill our prey through superior strength or speed. We follow them until they collapse from exhaustion.
We track them across impossible distances, through changing weather and hostile territory, never stopping, never losing the trail. She opened the laboratory door and stepped into the corridor beyond.
The Council thinks they're testing us. What they don't understand is that we're studying them.
And, when humans finish studying their prey, the hunt ends only one way. Sarah left New Eden 12 hours later, after confirming that the atmospheric purge had eliminated the pathogen and that emergency food supplies from Earth would arrive within the week. She didn't stay for the victory celebration or the debriefing with Earth Command. Instead, she took the first available transport to Kepler Station, the Galactic Council's primary research facility. Her travel documents identified her as Dr. Sarah Chen, xenobiological consultant hired by the Council to study human adaptation patterns in alien environments. The identity was completely legitimate, established through proper diplomatic channels, and provided her with access to Council facilities across known space. What the Council didn't know was that she had requested this assignment as part of humanity's long-term intelligence gathering strategy. What they also didn't know was that Sarah Chen had spent the past 3 months becoming the most dangerous individual in the galaxy. Kepler Station orbited a red giant star in neutral space, its massive structure housing research laboratories, cultural exchange centers, and the most comprehensive xenobiological database in known space. It was also the perfect place for a human scientist to study alien behavior patterns without attracting attention. Sarah's quarters were modest but comfortable, equipped with standard research terminals and communication systems. She had requested minimal accommodations, explaining that she preferred to spend her time in the laboratories and libraries rather than luxury suites. The station's administrators had been pleased by her humble attitude and dedication to research. They had no idea that her real laboratory was the portable sensor array hidden in her equipment cases, or that her real research involved mapping the station's security systems, communication protocols, and personnel rotation schedules. On her first morning at Kepler Station, Sarah attended the daily research briefing in Conference Room Alpha 7. The assembled scientists represented dozens of species, their diverse forms creating a living gallery of galactic evolution. She took her usual position at the back of the room, notebook in hand, observing everything while appearing to focus on her assigned research topics. Dr. Zarthon, a mantis-like researcher from the hegemony, was presenting findings from a study of primitive civilizations on the galactic rim. His chittering vocalizations were automatically translated into standard galactic, but Sarah had learned enough of his native language to detect the subtle condescension lost in translation. The subject species demonstrates typical patterns of aggressive expansion and resource depletion, Zarthon reported. Their technological development follows predictable curves, with peak advancement occurring approximately 2,000 years before ecological collapse. We project total civilization failure within 3 standard centuries. Sarah made notes about the presentation style and underlying assumptions. The Council's research methodology revealed more about their own psychology than about the species they studied. They approached every civilization with predetermined models of development and decline, looking for data that confirmed their expectations rather than challenging their theories. Dr. Veltar, a crystalline being from the Resonant Collective, posed a question that made Sarah's enhanced hearing implants focus automatically. What about the recent anomaly with the human agricultural systems? Have we gathered useful data about their problem-solving capabilities? Zarthon's mandibles clicked dismissively. The humans demonstrated basic competency in biological crisis management. They identified the pathogen vector and implemented appropriate countermeasures within acceptable timeframes. Nothing that suggests capabilities beyond standard Council predictions. Sarah continued taking notes while her mind processed the implications. The council researchers were analyzing humanity's response to their test, but they had misinterpreted the data. They thought humans had stumbled onto the solution through luck and basic detective work. They had no idea that Sarah had identified their methodology before the test even began. This was exactly the kind of intelligence advantage that persistence hunters used to bring down prey many times their size. Let the target think it was still hidden while you positioned yourself for the killing strike. After the briefing, Sarah spent several hours in the station's primary database, officially researching human biological adaptation to alien environments. In reality, she was mapping the Council's research priorities, identifying which member species were considered potential threats, and learning how the Council managed challenges to their authority. The database contained detailed files on over 300 civilizations that had been managed by the Council over the past 12,000 years. The euphemistic language couldn't hide the underlying pattern. Any species that showed signs of technological or cultural development beyond Council predictions was subjected to increasingly severe tests until they either submitted to permanent subordinate status or faced extinction-level challenges. Humanity was simply the latest entry in a catalog of civilizations that had been hunted to exhaustion by an organization that portrayed itself as a peaceful alliance of equals. But, as Sarah compiled her research, she began to see something the Council's own analysts had missed. Buried in their success stories were subtle indications that their system was becoming less effective over time. Species were adapting to Council testing methodologies faster than predicted. Some civilizations were developing technological capabilities that exceeded Council models. The galaxy was evolving, but the Council was trapped by 12,000 years of their own success. They had become the apex predator of their ecosystem, so dominant that they had forgotten how to recognize actual threats. Sarah smiled as she closed her research files. In 3 months, she had gone from observer to participant to infiltrator. The Council thought they were studying humanity's strengths and weaknesses, but she was learning far more about them than they were about her species. The hunt was progressing exactly as planned. That evening, Sarah received a coded transmission from Earth on her personal communication array. The message appeared to be routine correspondence from her family, but embedded within the text were intelligence updates from other human agents positioned throughout Council space. The picture they painted was sobering. Humanity's provisional status had triggered subtle but coordinated pressures across dozens of star systems. Trade agreements were being renegotiated to human disadvantage. Territorial boundaries were being adjusted to isolate human colonies. Cultural exchange programs were being suspended for administrative review. The Council was implementing a classic strategy of economic and social isolation, designed to weaken humanity's position before the next phase of testing began. It was sophisticated, patient, and historically effective. It was also exactly what Sarah had predicted. She composed her response carefully, using the same family correspondence format to hide her real message. Her recommendations were simple: continue appearing cooperative and grateful for Council membership while quietly strengthening defensive capabilities. Avoid showing any sign that humanity understood the Council's true intentions. Maintain the image of a young, naive species stumbling through galactic politics. Most importantly, give her more time to study their prey. As Sarah prepared for sleep in her modest quarters, she reviewed the day's intelligence gathering in her mind. Tomorrow she would attend another research briefing, spend more hours in the databases, and continue building her understanding of Council vulnerabilities. She would smile politely at alien researchers, ask simple questions that revealed complex information, and gradually position herself closer to the heart of galactic power. The Council believed they were conducting a careful study of human capabilities. What they didn't understand was that they had invited the galaxy's most dangerous predator into their home, given her access to their secrets, and asked her to observe their behavior patterns. Sarah Chen had been studying alien civilizations for less than a year, but she was already better at it than researchers who had been working for centuries. Not because she was smarter or more skilled, but because she approached the problem from a completely different perspective. The Council studied civilizations like a farmer studying crops, looking for useful qualities and deciding which ones to cultivate or harvest. Sarah studied them like a hunter studying prey, identifying weaknesses and planning the most efficient way to bring them down. Tomorrow, the hunt would continue. The second test came 6 months later, and it was brilliant in its subtlety. Sarah almost missed it entirely, which would have been exactly what the council intended. She was deep in the archives of Kepler Station, officially researching human psychological adaptation patterns, when her enhanced pattern recognition protocols detected an anomaly in the data feeds. Information requests from human colonies were taking 17% longer to process than standard galactic average. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would trigger automatic alerts, just enough delay to create friction in human research and development efforts. Sarah leaned back in her chair, removing her glasses to clean them while her mind processed the implications. Information warfare was far more sophisticated than biological attacks, and much harder to trace or prove. The Council wasn't trying to cut off human access to galactic knowledge, just slow it down enough to retard technological development. She pulled up her personal tablet and began cross-referencing the delays with Council research priorities. The pattern that emerged made her smile with professional appreciation. The information most critical to human expansion was experiencing the longest delays, while routine cultural and scientific data flowed normally. Someone with deep knowledge of human development patterns was carefully targeting their efforts to maintain current growth rates while preventing breakthrough advancements. It was exactly the kind of strategy Sarah herself would have designed if their positions were reversed. Dr. Veltar approached her workstation with the crystalline equivalent of casual interest, their light patterns shifting through frequencies that indicated friendly curiosity. Dr. Chen, you seem particularly focused today. Is your research progressing well? Sarah looked up with the slightly flustered expression she had perfected over the past months. Oh, hello Dr. Veltar. I'm sorry, I didn't notice you there. I was just trying to understand some inconsistencies in the data processing systems. Nothing important, just curiosity about efficiency optimization. Veltar's pattern shifted to what Sarah had learned indicated amusement. Efficiency optimization is a very human concern. Most species adapt their working methods to existing systems rather than trying to improve the systems themselves. I suppose we're just impatient, Sarah replied, carefully projecting embarrassment about her species' presumption. We're used to being able to improve things, even when they're already working well. This was exactly the conversation Sarah had hoped to trigger. Over the past months, she had carefully cultivated relationships with key researchers at Kepler Station, positioning herself as a harmless but curious human scientist who could provide insights into human psychology. Her apparent naivety made them feel safe discussing topics they would never reveal to human diplomats or military personnel. An interesting perspective, Veltar continued. How do humans typically approach problems with existing systems? Do you try to replace them entirely, or modify them incrementally? Sarah pretended to consider the question seriously while her mind raced through strategic calculations. This was an intelligence probe, disguised as academic curiosity. Veltar was trying to understand human problem-solving methodologies, probably to better predict responses to future tests. I think we tend to study the system first, she replied carefully. Try to understand how it works, why it was designed that way, what its limitations are. Then, we look for small changes that might improve performance without disrupting everything else. Veltar's patterns brightened with what Sarah recognized as satisfaction. A conservative approach, despite your reputation for rapid advancement. That suggests wisdom beyond your species' apparent youth. After Veltar departed, Sarah continued her research with renewed focus. The information warfare attack was more sophisticated than she had initially realized, requiring detailed knowledge of human development patterns and access to multiple Council information systems. This wasn't the work of a single species or even a small alliance. It required coordination at the highest levels of Council authority. Which meant it was time for Sarah to move to the next phase of her own plan. That evening, she composed another family correspondence, this one containing far more detailed intelligence than her previous communications. The Council was escalating their testing methodology faster than predicted, suggesting either greater concern about human capabilities or pressure from member species worried about the territorial implications of human expansion. More importantly, the sophistication of the information warfare attack provided Sarah with her first real opportunity to strike back. She encrypted her message with mathematical algorithms that appeared to be routine personal security protocols but were actually derived from human quantum mechanics research that exceeded galactic standard by several centuries. The encryption was unbreakable by Council technology, which would itself send a message about human capabilities to anyone monitoring their communications. But the real message was embedded in the routing protocols Sarah used to send the transmission. By carefully selecting relay stations and timing intervals, she created a data pattern that would look like random network fluctuations to casual observation but would clearly spell out a specific message to human intelligence analysts: begin Phase 2. 3 days later, Sarah received a priority message from Dr. Michael Harrison, head of human xenobiological research on Earth. The official content was a routine update on her research assignment, but the embedded codes told her everything she needed to know. Human intelligence assets throughout Council space had begun implementing the strategic recommendations she had developed over the past 9 months. The Council thought they were conducting careful tests of human capabilities while maintaining plausible deniability. What they didn't realize was that humans had been testing them in return, and their period of plausible deniability was about to end. Sarah's next target was Dr. Zarthon, the hegemony researcher whose presentations had revealed so much about Council psychology. She approached him after the morning briefing, carrying a data tablet loaded with carefully selected information about human biological adaptation. Dr. Zarthon, I was hoping I could discuss some of my findings with you, she began, projecting the nervous energy of a young researcher seeking approval from a respected senior colleague. Your work on primitive civilization development patterns has been incredibly helpful for understanding human historical context. Zarthon's mandibles clicked with pleasure. Like most academics, he was susceptible to flattery about his research, especially from species he considered intellectually inferior. Of course, Dr. Chen. I would be interested to hear what insights you have developed about your own species. Sarah activated her tablet, displaying a holographic model of human evolutionary development. To Zarthon, it would appear to be a straightforward biological analysis. To Sarah, every data point was a carefully crafted piece of strategic deception. What I find fascinating is how human development seems to follow the standard patterns you identified, but with some unusual variations, she explained, highlighting specific sections of the model. For example, our technological advancement curves show unexpected acceleration points that don't correlate with typical environmental pressures. Zarthon leaned closer, his compound eyes focusing on the displayed data. Yes, I see what you mean. These acceleration points appear to be linked to social rather than environmental factors. That suggests a higher degree of adaptive intelligence than we typically observe in species at your developmental stage. This was exactly the response Sarah had hoped for. She was feeding Zarthon information that would make humans appear more dangerous than the Council currently believed, but in ways that suggested they could be managed through social manipulation rather than direct confrontation. I've been wondering if this adaptive intelligence might explain some of the challenges my people have been experiencing with Council systems, she continued, carefully modulating her voice to sound confused rather than accusatory. We seem to have unusual difficulty with information processing delays and communication protocol variations. Zarthon's mandibles stilled, a reaction Sarah had learned indicated sudden alertness. What kind of difficulties, Dr. Chen? Sarah projected genuine puzzlement, as if she was discussing an academic problem rather than evidence of deliberate sabotage. Well, our researchers on various human colonies report that data requests sometimes take much longer than expected to process. And some of our communication attempts seem to get routed through unnecessarily complex pathways. I assumed it was just because we're new to galactic systems and don't understand the optimized procedures. The silence that followed was exactly what Sarah had been hunting for. Zarthon was processing the implications of her statement, trying to determine how much she actually knew about the Council's information warfare strategy. The fact that she had presented the evidence as confusion rather than accusation suggested she didn't understand its significance, but her ability to identify the patterns in the first place indicated capabilities the Council hadn't anticipated. Such difficulties are not uncommon for new species, Zarthon finally replied, but his vocal patterns carried undertones that Sarah's enhanced hearing could detect. He was lying, and he wasn't particularly good at it. Galactic information systems are complex, and it takes time to learn optimal utilization strategies.
Sarah nodded gratefully, as if his explanation had resolved her confusion. That makes sense.
I'll pass that along to our researchers. I'm sure they'll be relieved to know it's just a learning curve rather than any kind of technical problem.
After Zarthon departed, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had just accomplished 3 strategic objectives in a single conversation.
First, she had demonstrated to a key council researcher that humans were more capable of pattern recognition than their current intelligence assessments suggested. Second, she had revealed that humans were aware of the information warfare attacks without actually accusing the council of deliberate sabotage. Third, she had forced Zarthon to lie to her, which would make him personally invested in monitoring human responses to determine whether they had actually believed his deception.
This last point was crucial to Sarah's long-term strategy.
She wasn't just gathering intelligence about council capabilities and intentions. She was gradually making specific individuals within the council personally aware of her as a potential threat, while maintaining plausible cover as a harmless researcher.
Persistence hunting wasn't just about following prey until it collapsed from exhaustion.
It was about making the prey aware that it was being hunted, forcing it to expend energy on evasive maneuvers, driving it toward terrain that favored the hunter rather than the target. The Council had spent 12,000 years as the unchallenged apex predator of galactic civilization. They had forgotten what it felt like to be prey. Sarah was about to remind them. Over the following weeks, she implemented similar strategies with other key researchers at Kepler Station. She presented each of them with carefully crafted evidence that humans were detecting and adapting to Council testing methodologies, but always in ways that could be interpreted as accidental discovery rather than systematic intelligence gathering. Dr. Veltar learned that humans had developed workarounds for the information processing delays, improving their research efficiency despite the artificial obstacles. Dr. Cathmore from the collective discovered that human colonies were implementing redundant communication systems that bypassed Council monitoring protocols. Dr. Texluan of the Federation received reports that humans were beginning to question whether their territorial restrictions were actually necessary for galactic security. Each revelation was small enough to be dismissed as individual incidents. Taken together, they painted a picture of a species that was adapting to Council management strategies faster than predicted and, in ways that suggested deeper understanding of galactic politics than their behavior indicated. Sarah watched the growing unease among the research staff with professional satisfaction. She was creating exactly the kind of strategic uncertainty that would force the Council to accelerate their testing timeline and reveal their true capabilities. The breakthrough came during a late-night research session when Dr. Veltar approached her workstation with unusual urgency. Their crystalline structure was flickering through color patterns that Sarah recognized as indicating significant stress. Dr. Chen, I need to discuss something important with you, Veltar began, their harmonic voice modulated to frequencies that suggested confidential communication. Your research findings have been attracting attention from senior Council authorities. Some of them are concerned about the implications of human adaptive capabilities. Sarah looked up from her work with carefully projected confusion. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Is there something wrong with my research methodology? Veltar's pattern shifted to what Sarah had learned indicated internal conflict. There is nothing wrong with your research. The concern is about what your research reveals about human capabilities. Some Council members believe that your species may be more dangerous than initial assessments suggested. This was the moment Sarah had been building toward for the past year. She set down her stylus and gave Veltar her complete attention, projecting the kind of serious concern that suggested she was finally grasping the significance of the situation. Dangerous how? She asked quietly. We're just trying to learn about galactic civilization and find our place in it. I thought that's what the provisional membership period was designed to help us accomplish. Veltar's color patterns became more agitated. Dr. Chen, may I speak to you with complete honesty? Sarah nodded gravely. The provisional membership period is not what your delegation was told it was. It is a testing system designed to identify species that might threaten Council authority and either subordinate them or eliminate them before they become genuine challenges. The admission hung in the air between them like a weapon. Sarah let her face show the appropriate shock and betrayal, as if she was learning this information for the first time rather than confirming intelligence she had developed months earlier. I don't understand, she said weakly.
The Council is supposed to be a peaceful alliance. Why would they want to eliminate member species?
Veltar moved closer, their patterns now cycling through what Sarah recognized as fear and regret.
Because the Council is not what it appears to be.
It is a hierarchy designed to maintain the dominance of founder species over younger civilizations. Most species that join never advance beyond provisional status. Those that show signs of genuine independence or technological superiority face increasingly dangerous tests until they either submit or are destroyed.
Sarah let silence stretch between them, as if she was struggling to process this revelation.
In reality, she was calculating how much additional intelligence she could extract from Veltar's obvious need to confess his complicity in what he clearly recognized as an unjust system.
Dr. Veltar, she said finally, are you telling me that humanity is being set up for destruction?
The crystalline being's entire structure dimmed to barely visible light levels. I am telling you that unless your species finds a way to convince the Council that you pose no threat to their authority, yes,
you will be eliminated.
Sarah removed her glasses and cleaned them slowly, a gesture that had become her signature tell for deep thought. When she replaced them, her expression carried a determination that made Veltar's patterns flicker with something that might have been hope.
Then, I suppose, she said quietly, we'll have to convince them otherwise.
What Veltar didn't realize was that Sarah had no intention of convincing the Council that humanity was harmless. She was going to prove exactly the opposite. The hunt was about to begin in earnest. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened exactly 18 months after humanity's provisional admission, triggered by a series of incidents that had escalated beyond anyone's predictions. High Arbiter Zexthal stood before the assembled delegates, their metallic skin cycling through colors that indicated significant distress. Sarah Chen sat in her usual position at the back of the observation gallery, no longer disguised as a harmless researcher but openly identified as humanity's chief xenobiological consultant. Her transformation from shy scientist to confident strategist had been gradual enough that most delegates had barely noticed the change, but sharp enough that those paying attention recognized they were looking at someone entirely different from the nervous woman who had first taken notes in these chambers. The human situation has become untenable, Zexthal announced, their voice carrying harmonics that made several species translation implants struggle to keep up. What began as routine testing protocols has revealed capabilities that exceed our predictive models by significant margins. Ambassador Kethvar rose from his position among the hegemony delegation, his scales reflecting the chamber's lighting in patterns that Sarah had learned indicated aggressive confidence. High Arbiter, with respect, the issue is not human capabilities but human deception. They have been deliberately concealing their true nature while infiltrating our research facilities and intelligence networks. Sarah made careful notes about body language and vocal patterns throughout the chamber. After 18 months of systematic intelligence gathering, she could read the political undercurrents flowing beneath official statements. The Council was fracturing into factions, some demanding immediate action against humanity while others counseled caution. The carefully maintained unanimity that had preserved galactic stability for 12,000 years was breaking down. Exactly as she had planned. Zexthal activated a holographic display that filled the chamber's center with tactical information. The evidence is comprehensive. Human colonies have exceeded their assigned territorial boundaries in 17 star systems. Their technology development has accelerated beyond predicted curves in multiple fields. Most concerning, they have demonstrated the ability to infiltrate and manipulate our information systems without triggering security protocols. Dr. Veltar stood among the resonant delegation, their crystalline structure barely visible as they struggled with what Sarah recognized as cognitive dissonance between loyalty to the Council and personal ethical concerns. High Arbiter, perhaps the issue is not human deception but our own assumptions. Our testing methodologies were designed for species following standard development patterns. Humans may simply be adapting more rapidly than our models predicted. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of competing vocalizations as dozens of species began arguing simultaneously. Sarah continued taking notes, recording the alliance structures and power relationships revealed by who supported which positions. The information would be invaluable for the next phase of her strategy. High Counselor Merthak of the Collective raised one of their forearms, generating the telepathic silence that commanded attention throughout the chamber. When they spoke, their voice carried the weight of a hive mind encompassing billions of individuals across dozens of worlds. The question before us is not whether humans have exceeded our predictions, Merthak intoned. The question is whether they represent a threat to council authority that requires immediate termination protocols. Sarah felt the temperature in the chamber drop several degrees as the implications of that statement settled over the assembled delegates. Termination protocols were reserved for species that posed existential threats to galactic stability. In the Council's 12,000-year history, they had been implemented only 7 times. Each implementation had resulted in the complete extinction of the target species. Ambassador Sterling rose from the human delegation, her diplomatic training evident in her controlled posture despite the obvious stress of the situation. High Counselor, humanity requests the opportunity to address these concerns directly. We have no intention of threatening Council authority and would welcome the opportunity to clarify any misunderstandings about our activities. Kethvar's mandibles clicked dismissively. Honored Ambassador, with respect, the time for diplomatic clarification has passed. The evidence suggests a pattern of deliberate deception and systematic intelligence gathering that goes far beyond the activities of a species seeking peaceful integration. Sterling's gaze swept the chamber, looking for support among delegations that had seemed friendly during earlier sessions. Sarah noticed that most alien representatives were avoiding eye contact, their body language indicating withdrawal from association with humanity's cause. The isolation strategy was working exactly as the Council had designed it to work. But Sarah had been designing strategies of her own. She rose from her position in the observation gallery, her movement drawing attention throughout the chamber. Her transformation from nervous researcher to confident strategist was now impossible to ignore, and several delegates shifted uncomfortably as they recognized that they had been studied and analyzed by someone far more capable than they had realized. High Arbiter, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. May I address the Council regarding these allegations against my species? Zexthal's skin shifted through several color patterns that Sarah recognized as indicating surprise and uncertainty. Dr. Chen, you are present as a consultant, not as an official representative. Procedural protocols do not permit. The protocols permit any individual with relevant expertise to provide testimony regarding matters under Council consideration, Sarah interrupted smoothly. I believe my expertise in xenobiological analysis and human behavioral patterns may be useful for understanding the evidence you have presented. The silence that followed was heavy with political calculation. Several delegates were clearly uncomfortable with allowing Sarah to speak, but the protocols she had cited were ancient and fundamental to Council legal procedures. Denying her request would require explanations that might reveal more about Council intentions than anyone wanted to discuss publicly. Zexthal finally nodded. The Council recognizes Dr. Chen's expertise. You may proceed. Sarah walked to the chamber's center, her equipment case in hand, moving with the measured confidence of someone who had planned this moment down to the smallest detail. She activated her own holographic display, showing data that made several delegates lean forward with sudden attention. High Arbiter, honored delegates, you are correct that human activities have exceeded your predictive models, she began. What you have not accurately assessed is why this has occurred, or what it means for galactic stability. Her display showed a complex three-dimensional map of Council territory, with overlaying data streams that illustrated trade routes, resource flows, communication networks, and military deployments. To most observers, it appeared to be a standard political analysis. To anyone with deep knowledge of Council operations, it was a comprehensive intelligence assessment that revealed systematic vulnerabilities in galactic infrastructure. The Council's testing protocols are based on 12,000 years of successful management of younger civilizations, Sarah continued. Your methodologies are sophisticated, comprehensive, and historically effective. However, they were designed for species following predictable development patterns within controlled parameters. She manipulated the display, highlighting specific regions where human colonies had expanded beyond assigned boundaries. Human territorial expansion has not violated Council law because the territories we have occupied were officially designated as uninhabited and available for development. Your concern is not that we broke rules, but that we identified opportunities you didn't expect us to recognize. Murmurs of confusion spread through the chamber as delegates realized that Sarah was correct. Human expansion had technically remained within legal boundaries while demonstrating strategic thinking that exceeded council predictions. Sarah adjusted the display again, this time showing technology development curves that painted an even more disturbing picture. Similarly, human technological advancement has accelerated not through prohibited research, but through application of analytical methods that your models didn't account for. We study problems differently than other species, leading to solutions that appear to violate predicted development patterns.
High Counselor Merthak leaned forward, their telepathic presence pressing against the chamber's psychic shielding. Dr. Chen, are you claiming that human expansion and technological development are purely accidental? That your species has no awareness of the strategic implications of your activities?
Sarah smiled, and, for the first time since entering the chamber, she allowed her true nature to show through her diplomatic facade. The expression was patient, predatory, and absolutely terrifying to anyone who understood what they were seeing.
No, High Counselor.
I am claiming that human expansion and technological development are the result of systematic study of council operations, identification of exploitable vulnerabilities, and implementation of strategies designed to position my species for optimal survival in a hostile environment. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah had just openly admitted that humanity had been conducting intelligence operations against the council while maintaining plausible deniability about their intentions. Every delegate in the chamber understood that they were looking at evidence of capabilities that far exceeded anything in their files about human development. Ambassador Kethvar rose slowly, his scale shifting to colors that indicated combat readiness.
Dr. Chen, are you confessing that humanity has been conducting a systematic deception campaign against the council?
No, Ambassador Kethvar, Sarah replied with professional courtesy. I am confessing that humanity has been conducting a systematic survival campaign in an environment where we were marked for termination before we ever entered this chamber. She manipulated her display again, showing communication patterns and decision trees that revealed the council's testing methodology with mathematical precision. Your species have been implementing coordinated strategies designed to identify our weaknesses, exploit our dependencies, and ultimately eliminate us as a potential threat to established power structures. We have been implementing coordinated strategies designed to survive your attacks while gathering sufficient intelligence to defend ourselves effectively.
The political implications hit the chamber like a shockwave.
Sarah had just accused the council of attempting genocide while simultaneously demonstrating that humanity possessed intelligence capabilities that had completely penetrated council security. She had turned a termination hearing into a strategic standoff. High Arbiter Zexthal's skin cycled through rapid color changes as they processed the new dynamic.
Dr. Chen, your accusations are serious. Do you have evidence to support these claims?
Sarah activated a new section of her display, showing detailed analysis of the agricultural pathogen attack on New Eden, the information warfare campaign against human research efforts, and dozens of other incidents that the council had believed were undetectable. Each presentation was accompanied by biological and technical evidence that proved deliberate sabotage rather than natural challenges. I have comprehensive evidence, High Arbiter. What I do not have is any interest in using this evidence to demand justice or reparations for past attacks. What I am interested in is establishing a new framework for human-council relations based on accurate rather than deceptive assessments of respective capabilities. The chamber erupted again as delegates realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in council history. A provisional member species was demanding renegotiation of their status from a position of demonstrated strength rather than supplicant weakness.
Dr.
Veltar stood among the chaos, their crystalline structure now brilliantly illuminated with what Sarah recognized as relief and hope. High Arbiter, Dr. Chen is proposing that we acknowledge reality rather than continuing to operate under false assumptions. Humans have proven they can survive our testing protocols and develop countermeasures to our management strategies. Perhaps it is time to consider alternative approaches to integration. High Counselor Merthak's telepathic pressure intensified, creating a psychic silence that forced attention throughout the chamber. Dr. Chen, you speak of survival and defense, but your demonstration suggests capabilities that extend far beyond mere resistance to our authority.
Are you threatening the council?
Sarah removed her glasses and cleaned them slowly, the gesture now recognized by everyone in the chamber as indicating that she was about to deliver information of critical importance. Hi Counselor, I am informing the Council that humanity has spent the past 18 months learning everything we could about your civilization, your technology, your psychology, your power structures, and your vulnerabilities, she said quietly. We have done this not because we wish to threaten you, but because we needed to understand our enemies well enough to survive their attacks. She replaced her glasses and looked directly at High Arbiter Zexthal. What you decide to do with this information will determine whether we remain enemies or become something else entirely. The silence stretched between them like a bridge over an abyss. Sarah had just revealed that humanity possessed comprehensive intelligence about Council operations while offering the possibility of negotiated coexistence. She had demonstrated overwhelming capabilities while maintaining diplomatic language that allowed face-saving responses. Most importantly, she had forced the Council to make a choice between escalating to open warfare with a species that had proven more dangerous than predicted, or acknowledging that their 12,000-year dominance of galactic politics was about to change forever. High Arbiter Zexthal finally spoke, their voice carrying undertones that Sarah's enhanced hearing interpreted as resignation mixed with grudging respect.
Dr. Chen, what exactly is humanity proposing?
Sarah smiled again, but this time the expression carried warmth instead of predatory patience. We are proposing that the Galactic Council invite humanity to become full members not as subordinates, but as equals. We are proposing that instead of testing our weaknesses, you begin learning from our strengths. We are proposing that 12,000 years of galactic stagnation end today, and that tomorrow we begin building something better together. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated a future none of them had imagined possible. The age of Council dominance was ending, but the age of human galactic partnership was about to begin. Sarah had hunted her prey across 18 months of careful planning. Now she was offering them the choice between extinction and evolution. The hunt was complete. The real work was about to begin. 2 years later, Sarah Chen stood in the same chamber where humanity's fate had once hung in the balance, but everything else had changed. The observation galleries that had once been divided by species were now arranged in collaborative research clusters. The ceremonial platforms had been replaced with interactive holographic systems that allowed real-time data sharing between hundreds of participants. Most significantly, the atmosphere of barely contained hostility had been replaced by something the galaxy hadn't experienced in 12 millennia, genuine cooperation.
Sarah no longer sat in the back of the chamber.
As Director of Galactic Intelligence Coordination, she occupied a position at the center of the Council's strategic planning operations. Her transformation from shy xenobiologist to the most influential individual in galactic politics had been gradual but inexorable, driven by the same methodical approach that had originally identified Council vulnerabilities. Today's session was addressing a crisis that would have been unthinkable under the old system. A request for assistance from the hegemony, the same aggressive empire that had once led the campaign for humanity's termination. The Void Hunters have breached our perimeter defenses in 7 star systems, reported General Fexkar, his militaristic bearing unable to completely hide the desperation in his voice. Our conventional weapons are ineffective, our defensive strategies have failed, and our intelligence networks cannot predict their movement patterns. Without immediate assistance, the entire hegemony may fall within 6 standard months. The Void Hunters were a nomadic species from outside the galactic rim, utilizing technology and tactics that seemed to violate known physical laws. They consumed entire civilizations, leaving behind empty star systems scrubbed clean of all organic matter. In the past, they had been more legend than threat, emerging from dark space every few thousand years to destroy isolated outposts before disappearing again into the cosmic void.
This time was different.
This time they were conducting a systematic assault on galactic civilization itself. Sarah manipulated her holographic display, showing tactical analysis that integrated human intelligence gathering methods with alien technological capabilities.
The resulting picture was far more detailed than anything the galaxy had ever produced, revealing patterns in Void Hunter behavior that had remained hidden for millennia.
The Void Hunters are not using impossible technology, she explained to the assembled delegates.
They are using technology that operates on principles we haven't properly understood.
Their apparent ability to move through solid matter is actually manipulation of quantum phase states.
Their immunity to energy weapons is based on selective electromagnetic absorption. Their unpredictable movement patterns follow complex mathematical algorithms that account for gravitational influences we normally ignore.
Dr. Veltar, now serving as Deputy Director of Scientific Coordination, added their analysis to Sarah's display.
Working together, we have identified 17 specific technological approaches that should prove effective against Void Hunter capabilities.
However, successful implementation requires coordination between multiple species' industrial capacity and scientific expertise. The chamber that had once been dominated by territorial competition and species-based rivalry now functioned like a vast collaborative laboratory. Representatives shared data without hesitation, offered resources without calculation of immediate return, and focused on problem-solving rather than political positioning. The transformation had taken 2 years of careful work, but the results exceeded even Sarah's optimistic projections. High Arbiters Exthal, their authority now focused on coordination rather than control, addressed the hegemony general directly. General Thexkar, the Council stands ready to provide all necessary assistance to defend against the Void Hunter incursion.
Dr. Chen, what resources will be required?
Sarah pulled up a comprehensive logistics analysis that demonstrated the scope of galactic cooperation now possible under the new system. We will need industrial capacity from 47 star systems, scientific expertise from 18 species, and military coordination between 33 different fleet architectures. The timeline for effective response is aggressive but achievable if all participants commit to full resource sharing. General Thexkar's expression showed the kind of amazement that had become common among species adapting to post-council reality.
Dr.
Chen, you are proposing to coordinate a defense operation that spans half the galaxy and involves species that were enemies until recently.
How is such coordination possible?
Sarah smiled, the expression now carrying warmth and confidence instead of predatory calculation.
Because humans are very good at organizing complex hunting expeditions, General.
And the Void Hunters are about to discover what happens when an entire galaxy decides to hunt them. The next 6 months transformed galactic civilization in ways that went far beyond military cooperation. The emergency response to the Void Hunter threat required unprecedented levels of technological integration, resource sharing, and strategic coordination. Species that had maintained careful separation for millennia found themselves working together so closely that traditional boundaries became meaningless. Sarah coordinated the effort from a massive command center established on Kepler Station, now expanded to accommodate representatives from every member species. Her staff included the same researchers who had once studied humanity as potential threats, now serving as essential components of the most sophisticated intelligence network in galactic history. Dr. Zarthon approached her workstation during one of the brief rest periods she allowed herself, his chittering vocalizations modulated to frequencies that indicated professional admiration. Dr. Chen, your tactical analysis of Void Hunter psychology has proven remarkably accurate.
Their response to our coordinated counterattacks follows the patterns you predicted with 93% accuracy. Sarah looked up from the holographic displays that showed real-time tactical information from across the galaxy. Thank you, Dr. Zarthon. Though I should point out that the analysis wouldn't have been possible without your research into nomadic species behavior patterns.
Human psychology is excellent for understanding persistence hunting, but your work was essential for modeling social structures that operate on geological timescales. This kind of collaborative exchange had become standard operating procedure under the new galactic system. Species contributed their unique strengths to shared challenges, creating analytical capabilities that exceeded the sum of individual expertise. The result was not just more effective problem-solving, but the development of genuinely new approaches that no single species could have discovered independently. The breakthrough came during the 4th month of coordinated resistance, when a combined human resonant research team discovered that Void Hunter technology was based on manipulation of dark matter interactions. This revelation opened up entirely new fields of physics and led to the development of countermeasures that proved devastating to Void Hunter offensive capabilities. Sarah watched the final engagement from the command center, surrounded by representatives from species across the galaxy as human-designed tactics coordinated alien technologies to achieve what none of them could have accomplished alone. The Void Hunter fleet, previously invincible, found themselves outmaneuvered, outgunned, and ultimately forced to retreat to the dark space from which they had emerged. The victory celebration that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of individual species claiming credit for their contributions, the focus was on collective achievement and shared success. The cooperation forged during the crisis had created bonds between civilizations that made the old council system seem primitive and wasteful by comparison. But, for Sarah, the real victory was not the defeat of the Void Hunters. It was the transformation of the galaxy from a zero-sum competition between isolated civilizations into a collaborative network of species working toward shared prosperity. High Arbiter Zexthal found her in the command center after the formal ceremonies had ended, most of the staff having departed to join the celebrations throughout the station. Their metallic skin was cycling through colors that Sarah had learned to interpret as deep satisfaction mixed with philosophical contemplation. Dr. Chen, when you first revealed humanity's true capabilities to the Council, I believed we were facing the end of galactic stability, Zexthal said quietly. I was certain that your species would either be destroyed or would destroy the existing order. I did not anticipate that you would create something better to replace it. Sarah smiled as she powered down her displays and prepared to join the celebrations herself. High Arbiter, humans are persistence hunters. We don't just chase our prey until it collapses from exhaustion. We chase it until it evolves into something that no longer needs to be prey. She gestured toward the windows that showed the diverse collection of ships from dozens of species, their crews working together with the easy familiarity of colleagues who had shared dangerous challenges and emerged victorious together. The Council system was 12,000 years old, sophisticated, and effective at maintaining order. But it was also stagnant, exclusive, and ultimately unsustainable. When we identified its vulnerabilities, we could have exploited them to overthrow the existing hierarchy and establish human dominance. Instead, we chose to use our understanding to create a system where dominance itself was unnecessary. Zexthal's colors shifted to patterns that indicated something like wonder. You transformed your enemies into partners, your competition into collaboration. You turned a hunting expedition into a rescue mission. Sarah nodded, removing her glasses to clean them one final time. When she replaced them, her expression carried the satisfaction of a hunter whose prey had successfully evolved beyond the need to be hunted. That's what persistence hunters do, High Arbiter. We don't just pursue our targets across impossible distances and hostile terrain. We pursue them across impossible changes, through evolutionary adaptations, until both predator and prey become something new. The celebration continued throughout Kepler Station as representatives from hundreds of worlds shared stories, technologies, and plans for continued cooperation. The shy girl who had once sat in the back of council chambers taking quiet notes had become the architect of the greatest transformation in galactic history. But Sarah Chen knew that this was not an ending. It was barely even a beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with challenges that would require even greater cooperation and understanding. There were other threats beyond the galactic rim, other mysteries waiting to be solved, other species yet to be contacted and integrated into the growing network of collaborative civilizations. Humans were persistence hunters, and Sarah Chen was the most persistent hunter of them all. She had tracked the Galactic Council across 18 months of careful planning, pursued them through political transformation and military crisis, and, finally, brought them safely to a future where they no longer needed to fear being hunted. Now she was ready to begin hunting the next impossible target, a galaxy where every species could reach its full potential without threatening the prosperity of others, where cooperation replaced competition as the primary driver of advancement, where the universe itself became humanity's willing partner in the greatest hunt of all. The hunt for ultimate understanding, unlimited growth, and permanent peace among the stars. It was her ability to make them want to follow her willingly into whatever impossible future she chose to hunt next. The pursuit would continue, as it always had, as it always would. But, now, for the first time in galactic history, the entire universe was hunting together. And Sarah Chen was leading them toward prey that no species had ever dared to pursue before, the infinite potential of truly collaborative civilization among the stars.